Hello, Dries. I know that you have been a philosophical practitioner for many years. You were among the first group in the Dutch movement of philosophical practice in the early 1980s. That's a long time ago. And I know that you have been doing philosophical practice in all kinds of frameworks, in Socratic dialogue, counseling, workshops of all kinds. Now, you say that all these are really expressions of the art of living. Can you explain what do you mean by philosophy and the art of living?
Well, I started with philosophical practice because I had myself questions about how to live. And that's also why I started to study philosophy. But for me, when I started philosophy, the study of philosophy, it was very abstract, the way they taught it to me. So I came along this philosophical practice. In the beginning, it was philosophical counseling. And for me, it was a way to address this question of how to live. And for me, the art of living, as it started already a long time ago with the Greeks, is for me to address this issue. And I consider the art of living as a secular spirituality.
So, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by secular spirituality?
Well, spirituality is often connected with some religion. And I'm not in that sense a religious person, but I think the questions of religion are also important to me. So I consider myself as a secular person with spirituality, and I explore that way in the art of living, and I do that with other people. So, yeah.
So when you do it with yourself, how do you explore it?
Everything I do starts with my own questions. And the formula for that is how to find a form in which I can explore my own questions by finding a form that is can be interesting for others. So if I, for example, do philosophy of the art of living, I have a question. I explore it by doing reading groups. We read books of philosophers who are dealing with this question. And then I create a workshop or a course and present the results of this investigation to others.
Can you give an example of an issue, philosophical issue, that you deal with in this way?
Yes, for example, my new course on the art of living is authenticity. The role of authenticity, I think, is the main value in the art of living. So I read books of Rousseau, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Heidegger, Sartre and Camus, and so that's the course.
So you read it yourself because it's important to you, and you reflect on it and organize it. Maybe you write a little bit for yourself, and then you encounter others in workshops and other frameworks and discuss it with them.
Sure, that's it. So that's for me, and I like that's why I like philosophy. There are many different perspectives on the same issue. So for me, philosophers are kind of embodied perspectives, and to present them next to each other will confuse myself and others in a positive way. One answer is no answer. And for me, to confuse is one of the main goals of philosophy.
Okay, so to confuse is one of the main goals of philosophy.
Yes, also to offer answers, but not, it's an answer is important, but don't identify yourself too much with one answer.
No, I like it. I like it. So what do you do when you look at, let's say, 5 or 6 different approaches to authenticity? What do you do, or what do you make people in your workshops do?
So, well, for me, that's also for me, philosophy is, how to say that, putting your life at risk. Philosophy and consumption are excluding each other to me. You cannot receive a class of philosophy and stay outside. You're involved. So if I read a book, I am involved, and I try to involve others in this reading group also. It's not a distance way of looking at a philosopher. I hate historical approaches of philosophers. Philosophy is important if it says something to me about being human now. If it has nothing to say about that, it's historically interesting perhaps, but not to me.
But what do you do when you have several different approaches? Do you choose between them? Do you create your own approach? Do you leave it open and do not answer?
Yeah, so it looks like they're excluding each other, but more often it is that they focus on just an aspect of the question of the issue, and it enriches the whole thing by offering different approaches. And so when people come in a workshop or in a course, sure, they don't. They will have more with Nietzsche, another one with more with Kierkegaard or with Sartre, but it's always good to hear that there are different ways of thinking about the same issue. So it's really enriching myself to see this different, to hear this, to know these different approaches, and I hope that will happen the same to participants.
And how does the process develop? Do you clarify to yourself your own view on authenticity?
Yes. Why? For me, like most teachers will know, teaching is most beneficial for the teacher, so it's first by studying, by asking myself what does it mean to me, and after then to find a form to present it to others. It's really clarifying to myself in the first place, and I hope it will be clarifying for participants.
What is clarifying? Does it mean that I choose one of the different approaches?
No, it's like, for me, perspective is like, here I'm living in Amsterdam already a very long time. I've seen streets many times, but if there's a guide who knows something to say about the street that I didn't know, I will see the street in a different way. That's for me, like in a very simple example, what happens with philosophers. They are opening up a new perspective on the same thing. It's life, what we share all. And for me, it's important to...
If I understand you correctly, it's not that you want at the end one theory about authenticity, but rather different perspectives.
Yes.
So the enrichment of the understanding is not one formula, but rather is different perspectives and how they relate to each other.
Yeah, and for me it's also important that to keep an open space, not to impose that one vision is occupying that space. Philosophy is keeping an open space, but by introducing different visions. And if you just cope with one philosopher, the risk is very high that this one philosopher will occupy that space.
I understand.
And so, and it will be difficult to do that by introducing different visions.
I understand. Very interesting. Let me ask one last question. Let's say that I go through this process, that you help me to go through this process. Now the process ended, maybe after 2 weeks or 2 months. How does it influence my life? What does it do to me, the fact that I did this process?
Well, I think it's for sure. I don't know what happens to all these participants, but what happens to me and what I hear also from others is that it clarifies gray areas. It clarifies questions that I even didn't know that I had, and it gives words to feelings or something that I sense, but I don't know how to name it. And all these philosophers have their own concepts and their own ways of thinking, and they can help to make your own story or to look at it from a different angle.
So by connecting what you're saying now with the idea that you said before, that confusing can be a very positive thing, would you say that it enriches the
Yes.
person? It enriches the way he or she relates to himself in the case of authenticity, or to the world?
Yes, often we are just, we have one way to look at things. So to realize that there are different ways is confusing. But I think it's a positive way to be confused by seeing that there are these different ways, and it's maybe helpful.
Making life more complicated.
More rich.
And richer, yes. Rich, complicated, a little bit confused.
And Deleuze had an idea about concepts. And he says a concept is making something thinkable, and thereby you can experience it as well. So if you don't have a concept for something, it will be difficult to experience it. It will be something vague, and so introducing new concepts will also invite you to new experiences.
Very interesting. And again, richness and of experiences.
And for me, that's a very important thing from the beginning. I started philosophy and also philosophical practice because I didn't feel really at home in the world, in life. I was confused myself, but in a negative way. And for me, philosophy and all these different perspectives make me feel more at home in life. So it's not only more rich, but also it's making me feel myself at home.
Very interesting. Thank you, Dries.